This is America. This is the country I've served and defended, that all my brothers have served and defended. And here, right matters. Joining us today, MSNBC chief legal correspondent and host of The Beat, Ari Melber. We're also joined by MSNBC legal analyst Maya Wiley, who previously worked in the civil division of the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York. Former Democratic senator from Missouri and current MSNBC political analyst Claire McCaskill. Former U.S. attorney, now professor at the University of Alabama School of Law. Also an MSNBC contributor, Joyce Vance. MSNBC national security analyst Jeremy Bash, who served as former Chief of Staff at the CIA and the Department of Defense, joins us. And MSNBC National Security Analyst Ned Price is a former Senior Director and spokesperson for the National Security Council, where Alexander Vindman worked. Jeremy Bash, let me start with you. All day long, a theme kept coming out whether Republicans wanted it to or not. Lieutenant Colonel Vindman has a single ideology, and it is patriotism and service to the United States. That seemed to be this inconvenient fact that Republicans kept trying to squash and quash and smear. In your view, do you think they landed any punches? What do you think the impact was of this first session of testimony today?
Well, Nicolle, I thought Colonel Vindman was very effective. Per his training, per the way he was taught in the United States Army, he told the truth. He laid out the facts. He talked about the fact that Gordon Sondland had told the Ukrainians that unless they investigated the Bidens, they would not receive military aid. And right away, Colonel Vindman reported that inappropriate, unlawful conduct to the Council of the National Security Council. And further, when he heard the phone call by the president, he did the same. And he did something very courageous, perhaps even more courageous than his own service in the battle zone. He spoke out today against the most powerful person in our country and possibly the world, the commander-in-chief, the president. And he did it because, as he said, here right matters. I thought he was highly effective. The state of the Republican defense also hasn't changed, Nicolle. In some ways, they've tried to defend this and said there was no quid pro quo. Colonel Vindman and others said, actually, there was. They've tried to say this wasn't a demand, it was a favor. Colonel Vindman said, no, it was a demand. And so I think really the state of the defense is where Representative Stefanik said, which is it was appropriate for the president to make this request to Zelensky. And I think that's going to be the heart of the matter, which is whether it is appropriate for a president to use his office, to use taxpayer money, to use military aid, to demand investigations of political rivals. If Republicans think that's okay, they're going to stay on the president's side. If they don't think it's okay, they have a reason to break.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.